Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Happy Juneteenth.
Indeed, federal holiday, important day. I am not writing. I normally write Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Bill, are you working today?
Yeah, my column is runs on Thursday, so I need to get it done today. So sadly I can't take the day off.
So quick announcement. You know this, Bill, but for those who don't, after 7 years at the Daily Beast, I've got about a week left. There's a lot of shakeups there, as you know. It's a crazy industry. So it's time for me to move on. I do not know what my next chapter will be. So if you're a DMZ Army member, and let me know, would you want more videos? Would you support a Substack? Would you want to join Patreon if we had more videos or ad-free? I don't know what the future will hold for me. Possibly male model, maybe not. But I wanted to announce that because it's just became official, Bill.
Well, I know the future is bright for Matt Lewis. The Daily Beast's upheaval, obviously not your fault. You weren't fired for cause. The Daily Beast is going through a whole, dismantling, it seems. And I'm sure you're going to land at a great place, and the future is going to be bright.
Well, thank you, my friend. The good news is we have a lot to cover this week, not just Matt Lewis employment news, including an upcoming debate. We've got Joe Biden wondering, stumbling around, not sure where he's going. And we've got a lot of material to keep us busy.
There's no stumbling. There's no wandering. This is all so transparently phony.
Well, look, I will leave it to this is an old story now, or people have seen the videos, I'm sure. If not, watch. Yesterday I did an episode of The Wrong Stuff, which you can find at youtube.com/Matt Lewis, where we played this video, and I'll let people judge for themselves. I have to say, Bill, I do think that on one hand, I will grant you that the cropping of these videos make them appear worse than they are. However, it ain't great. And the video at the Hollywood fundraiser with Jimmy Kimmel, where Barack Obama kind of takes President Biden by the hand and leads him off the stage, just does not look good, even if you see it in better context.
Clearly, nothing happened during the event to raise an eyebrow, because they didn't clip anything while he was talking, right? He did the whole thing with Jimmy Kimmel, Barack Obama. He talks and talks and talks. No one says anything's weird there. They're walking off the stage, like they're both walking in the same direction. They're doing, the music's playing. They're doing the finger waves and the points and all that stuff. And Obama's like a step ahead of him, and Obama's still doing it. And Biden essentially pauses for like 5 seconds. He's not going to just keep going while Obama's doing his thing. They got to go together. And then Obama's kind of like, all right, I'm done. And then he kind of, grabs the hand, does the pat on the back, and they walk out together. Like, we saw Mitch McConnell bona fide freeze, like in the middle of talking. Like, that's a freeze. And apparently he's recovered. It's not even like...
that was much worse.
This is just like, I'm taking a pause while my buddy is doing some more hand waves.
I mean, I would say, I think the problem is this comes on the heels of the G7 thing and the Juneteenth
G7
thing.
I mean,
so
the Washington posted a thorough fact check of the G7 thing. In fact, there's nothing there. There are videos where they literally are like airbrushing out the people he was walking towards.
No, you're again with the G7 thing. There are these people parachuting.
Yeah.
And there's a crowd, right? There's a crowd of like dignitaries, the Italian prime minister, I believe, and everyone else is looking in one direction, and Biden is looking in a different direction. Now, the way the video is cropped, it looks like Biden may just be looking into like, the void, but in fact, he's also looking at different parachuters.
Right.
But part of the problem is it looks bad, the optics are bad, and it plays into this narrative. Now, Bill, I will say it's possible that narrative helps Biden as we head into this debate, right? Because as you've noted, he seems to be maybe better at talking than he is at walking. And so it may be that we are now creating this narrative that says Biden is old, Biden can't compete, and then if he has a good debate, that will actually the the narrative will help him at that point.
Well, on one hand, they've set his expectations at rock bottom. The Trump people have done this absolutely wrong, where they literally say he can't string two sentences together. So when he does string two sentences together, that point's debunked. The flip side of that is they don't care what actually happens. They're going to take some clip. They're going to do something and chop it up where there's a little bit of a stumble, or maybe he switches out a name, which Donald Trump does plenty himself. Or they'll do something where like he maybe takes a pause, or he looks a certain way and create a whole narrative around it, and hope that either you didn't see the thing in real time, or you didn't, you just don't really care, because they have created this narrative that they want to perpetuate no matter what the actual facts are.
Yeah, but narratives work better when there is an element of truth to them, right? Like Sarah Palin never said, I could see Russia from my front porch, but people think she did, partly because she said a lot of crazy, stupid things, and it sort of rang true. And I do think that the problem for Biden is that even if these clips are, in some cases, out of context or misleading, there's an element of truth to it. People know that, and it reinforces that narrative. So,
the element of truth is not he has some form of dementia. Element of truth can be he's old and he's walking stiffly, and he has more of a stammer than before. That's not the same as like literally falling apart in front of our eyes. So, like, what is element of truth is what's being debated here.
he does look clueless in some cases, though, and I don't look. You could. This is not a deep fake, as the press secretary says. I think she called it a cheap fake.
Yeah.
A deep fake would be completely faking. It's not even Biden wasn't even there. He never.
Making him say something
Obama never even took his hand. Right. That is not what this is. So they have a lot to work with. It would be hard to take Bill Scher and make him look the way that they're making Joe Biden look, because
Joe Biden disagree with
look.
that. If you had me at an event, believe me, I could space out. I might look off into. I might have like thoughts in my head that are like not relevant to what's going on around me. I think you could play this game with anybody. Obviously, it hits a little harder when you're older because it's literally playing on ageism. But plenty of us do little quirky things like this. They just don't get called on it the same way. There's one thing you were showing me just before where people are dancing and he's not dancing. Well, he might be saying, I'm the president of the United States. If I start dancing, they're going to like rip me to shreds about how stupid my dancing is. So I'm going to be stiff as a rock here. There's all sorts of reasons to explain why.
I think we could agree that dancing would have been worse. I think we could agree on that.
He's kind of like, when's this dancing going to end? Because I'm really stuck here. Yeah, I just wonder if people are going to watch the debate, because it's not a Commission on Presidential Debates event. It's a CNN event with ad breaks, which we didn't have with the former official debates. I did see on social media that ABC is going to pick up the feed too. I don't know if everyone else is going to do it. So I just don't know if it's going to get this. Is it the same like stop everything, nothing else on TV, you have to watch this kind of moment, or is it just another show that's on the dial when you're flipping around? But it's not going to have zero ratings. It's going to be a hyped event. There is this high stakes drama around it. Can Biden string two sentences together? Is Trump going to go off the rails? But it's a little bit of an unknown for me, like how many people are gonna watch here.
I do think the rules, CNN announced the rules, I think, on Sunday. There's not going to be a live audience. They're going to be able to mute the microphones of the person who's not speaking it's not their turn. And I have to think those rules are going to help Joe Biden.
Which I think is why they set on them. And from what I heard from Trump, I think just yesterday, he was already talking about this as being 3 against 1. Jake Tapper, Dana Bass, Joe Biden against him. It's similar to the trials. You're not really trying to win over the jury. You're trying to establish a narrative why everything is rigged against you. So on one hand, he's ratcheting down Biden's expectations somewhat absurdly. On the other, he's rapping down his own expectations by saying, well, of course, I'm going to get a raw deal here. Of course, these rules were stacked against me. Of course, Biden insisted on all these things that are unfair to me. I accepted it because I'm this magnanimous guy that had to make sure we had a debate one way or another. But come on, of course I did a terrible job because this is a rigged event.
I mean, if we buy Trump's whole premise, he allowed someone to steal an election from him. Now he's allowing someone to rig the rules of the debate against him. What happened to like wanting a winner? And it's so weird that it's the conservatives, the Republican Party, who are so embracing this kind of victimhood, whining, complaining mentality. I mean, this is old news, of course, but once again, this is an example. Like, adapt and overcome. Win. Don't complain. Find a way to win. And part of that is fighting for the debate rules to favor you instead of just rolling over and accepting what someone else says is going to be the way it is.
Well, Trump has always been a consummate whiner and complainer. I mean, it's one of the things about him that I find hard to comprehend why it works. His whole thing is to be very strong and commanding and bullying, and yet when things go wrong for him, he is the biggest whiner and blame shifter and denier that there possibly can be. I mean, it's petulant child behavior, and I would think people who like strength would not be impressed with that, but they've bought in so hard that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's super weird. And obviously we've had Sean Hannity, who is laying the groundwork, first saying maybe Trump shouldn't do the debate, then later saying, well, Joe Biden's going to win. I think Hannity is sort of pre-spinning the possibility of Biden winning by talking about how Biden's going to be on caffeine or possibly other drugs. So you can already see them starting to lay the groundwork, as you were saying, Bill, of explaining, how about instead of that, preparing to win? But yeah, this is the new Republican Party, apparently.
Well, I saw a statement made by one of Trump's spokespeople to Politico saying that, Trump's not going to be shot up on chemicals like Biden. And there was no mention in the story that that's a baseless accusation. So I do think the media needs to be better at. You can't just let Trump make an accusation like that and not say there's zero evidence for this. But that's the narrative they're putting out there. So even if Biden does well, there's an excuse for it.
So obviously there are a few moments in a campaign and a general election that are kind of built-in events that are likely to matter as much as anything can matter. One of them is a debate. And then the other one is very quickly approaching these conventions. And the Republicans are holding their convention in Milwaukee. And Donald Trump, a while back, like about a week ago, criticized Milwaukee. Now I think he's saying he loves it. What did you make of that whole mini scandal, Bill?
I mean, I have to, I'm a little conflicted about it because there's the part of me that's saying, LOL, nothing matters. You can say whatever, no one's going to care. But it clearly was not what Republicans wanted this convention to be premised with. When they picked Milwaukee, they didn't say we picked Milwaukee because it's a horrible, crime-ridden city that can't run an election. They picked it because it's a great city in one of the most important swing states in the country. And the Democratic mayor took a little heat for, soliciting the convention. They were the site for the Democratic convention in 2020. They ended up not being an economic bonanza because of the pandemic. And so they're like, hey, we have all this infrastructure here ready for a convention. And there was even more blowback in Nashville, which you might be surprised by because it's a red state, but it's a blue city. And so Republicans took Milwaukee, and Reince Priebus was one of the guys that engineered it. He's from Wisconsin, and so to say this in a closed-door session to House Republicans, to have the House Republicans themselves essentially admit to it but make excuses for it, and not get their story straight about it. So they're giving different narratives of what he meant, and then Trump then saying, "Well, I didn't say it at all. And by the way, it is crime ridden, and you can't run an election." It's. I mean, on one hand, you could argue, well, look, Trump wins Wisconsin by juicing the votes of racist white people who live in the suburbs and hate Milwaukee, so they're not going to care. But he's also trying to pick up black vote. I mean, he's been doing events. He's been going to Harlem. He's elevating black surrogates. So I just think it makes the job harder for him to add this wrinkle to what is otherwise intended to be a really stage-managed, scripted event. This is very much off script.
Yeah, it's a schizophrenic campaign, but I'm not sure that it matters and anyone's keeping score of that things are illogical or counter narrative. I think he's missing a great line, though, Bill. I think it should be, if Milwaukee's so great, why did Laverne and Shirley leave? If Milwaukee's so awesome, why did Laverne and Shirley flee to California? Riddle me that.
Should he be praising California over Milwaukee? Is he a coastal leader, or is he a real American?
A lot of people are saying that, I don't know, but like maybe he doesn't bring up the California thing, but I think it would be funny if he were to invoke Laverne and Shirley. But anyway, that's not, that would be a Trumpy thing maybe to do, but I guess the moment.
Well, there's one of the key point here that one of the key point I want to stress. The crime rate, the homicide rate in Milwaukee had this huge jump in 2020 when Trump was president. And of course, this is, there was a huge jump in crimes throughout the pandemic. It's not just Milwaukee, but Milwaukee had a particularly big jump. And those numbers have gone down in the last 2 years. Not just the homicide numbers, but also other crime numbers have gone down in Milwaukee. This is the kind of thing that Trump can't acknowledge because they're very committed to everything's falling apart. The whole country's crime infested. They can never let numbers compromise their narrative. They're big lie people. You repeat the big lie, you ignore the facts. But this does give Biden some opportunity. I mean, this is the kind of thing where it's a little hard for me to say this with confidence, but I do think to some extent, like talking about immigration is always hard for Biden because it's inherently a net negative subject for him. There was a big illegal immigration spike on his watch. You can say it's coming down now. Maybe he's getting a handle on it, but he still has to kind of account for what happened, previously. Crime really is a positive issue for Biden, even if the perception isn't there right now. But there's a very clear case that they can make. And they can also talk about, it also opens up the whole, and by the way, you're a convicted criminal narrative, which the Biden campaign is leaning more into right now. Crime's down on my watch, except for you, because you're now a convicted felon. And they can also have all the things that I mentioned in the previous show about Trump's hypocrisies on crime. So I think crime's a very bad place for Trump to go. There's at least a lot of opportunities for Biden to flip the script on that. Harder on immigration, easier on crime.
And by the way, kudos to you, Bill, because I feel like the Biden people are paying attention to you because you went out a few weeks ago and said they should tie this conviction in New York with all the other bad stuff he's done, including be found liable of sexual assault. And the Biden team is actually out with a campaign ad this week that does precisely that. They call him a convicted felon, but they also expand it from the New York hush money trial to all the other, or not all, but some of the other bad things that Trump has done. So they're making a broader case, which is precisely what you said they ought to be doing to begin with.
Honestly, I mean, when the E. Jean Carroll verdict came down, not a lot of commentary from elected Democratic officials in the White House about it, which I always thought was kind of weird. And so I'm curious what prompted. I mean, so I understand that they got a certain amount of data, focus group poll data, showing, hey, this actually is moving the needle a little bit. Maybe we should try to drive this. I'm curious what kind of research they did because someone came to a conclusion, because this wasn't part of the narrative before, to weave in the sexual assault verdict. What research did they do to conclude, you know what, this actually, has some potency here? I assume that wasn't put in there by accident or on a whim.
And there is polling now out, Bill, that suggests that, to a certain degree at least, the conviction in the New York case is actually hurting Trump.
I mean, a little bit. I mean, it's not a massive move of the needle. You can find certain polls where Trump has ticked up a little bit post verdict, but I think there are more where that's not the case, where that is the case. And I think I'm just going to try to look quickly at the average, the Real Clear Politics average right now. The two-way, my preferred metric, since we still have a lot of uncertainty about what minor party candidates are going to be on the ballot.
Yeah. Okay, but I will say, no, it's possible, Bill, though, that other things are hurting Biden, but that people are saying that they are less likely to vote for Trump after the conviction. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Well,
I think I've seen polls to that effect.
There's specific polls about that, and it's not necessarily most people say that, but the question is, of those who do say it makes them less likely, are these people who were already going to vote Biden anyway, or are they people genuinely on the swing? I mean, it could be only 10% of people who say less likely, but if those 10% are actual swing voters, that's a big deal. And I think we have some evidence that there is some swing in that number that Trump should be concerned about. So I think right now, so you go from like May 29th, I think that's when the verdict came down. Trump was up 1.2 in the Real Clear Politics average. It got down to 0.2 or 3 here, I think. And that's bumped up a little bit. Now it's at 0.8. So look, you could look at that and conclude, you know what, maybe it's not really moving the needle at all. Maybe it's just, same old, same old. But because there is this other data in there saying, maybe there's just enough on the swing for it to make a difference. And again, I don't think it has to be, you're judging it just based on the instant reaction might not tell you the full story. The question is there enough movement there? Do I see a little bit of movement? And can I push it? Is there enough there to make people pause that if I drive it and emphasize it, I can actually make that number bigger? I think that's where the Biden campaign is at right now.
Indeed. Well, Bill, before we go, and for those who are paying close attention, our connectivity is not as good as it normally is. And I got to get out there on the, hustling for a new job. So time is of the essence. But I know you're working on something about Turning Point USA.
Yeah.
And something, I don't know, are they managing Trump's ground game? I do know that Charlie Kirk has been alarmed that Joe Biden has a lot more field offices than the Trump campaign. But tell us, if you would, at this point, I know you're not done this column yet, but how's this shaping up? What are you seeing?
Well, what the Trump campaign is doing, which in my mind is crazy, is they are relying on Turning Point USA for the field operations, for the get out the vote effort. And they don't have much of a track record in this area. So I'm just, there's been a few stories about this recently. I'm going to read just from CNN quick. Donald Trump's campaign is taking a vastly different approach to 2020 compared with 2024 compared with 2020, with plans for fewer staff and expenses, including what the campaign views as superfluous brick and mortar offices. Instead, the campaign pledges to run a more efficient operation that will lean heavily on data modeling, micro-targeting, and relying on wealthy conservative groups for data, infrastructure, and significant bank accounts. One of those groups, perhaps one of the most important, is Turning Point Action. Turning Point was one of the several groups that sat down with campaign advisors during a donor retreat earlier in the year. TPA, an affiliate of Turning Point USA, the youth organization started by Trump ally Charlie Kirk, is aiming to ultimately spend $108 million on a get out the vote effort in key battleground states. The Chase the Vote program has built out infrastructures in Arizona, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So the TPA program is built around. But Trump's team members insist they do have people on the ground. They just aren't all paid by the campaign. The TPA program is built around relational organizing, a form of community organizing that requires hired ballot chasers, full-time staff who are trained to build relationships with specific members of the community and ensure they vote in the upcoming election. One source familiar with the plan said the prevailing wisdom of the consulting class was, let's go to those swing districts and really try to move those voters. Well, we don't agree. We're going to where the Republicans are. We're going to drive up the score in those areas and get the people that stayed home in 20 or 2022. So I read all that for a reason. So one, Trump campaign's going on the cheap. I think it probably because their campaign fundraising is going to a lot of legal costs. They're relying on an outside group. It's a hard-right group that doesn't have a great track record in getting out the vote. You know, they did get out the vote stuff in Arizona. They're based in Arizona. They did this for Kerry Lake in Blake Masters 2022. That was a ground game election, particularly the governor's race. That was a close race, and the ground game came up short. And the philosophy of the get out the vote operation is forget the swing. Let's just find the low propensity hard right voters that don't always show up and get them to show up. I'm sure those voters exist. I'm not saying there's like nothing to the theory, but it's a very echo chamber kind of theory that gives you an excuse not to do the hard thing. Let's not worry about swing voters. That they're gonna be hard to persuade. Trump's got a lot of rough edges. Let's not even worry about that. You know, you're seeding a vote. You're seeding a constituency to Biden if you're doing it that way. So I just think it's like bad strategic thinking on top of bad strategic thinking. And considering this could well be a game of inches. I mean, not every election is. Maybe one candidate breaks free from the pack, then maybe a ground game isn't what determines it. But last two elections, we've had 3 states come down to less than 1% of the vote. That is a kind of a ground game thing, or at least can be a ground game thing. It's a hell of a bet. It is a hell of a bet to make on this election. It's certainly not one I would make.
No, I agree. If campaigns matter, if blocking and tackling matters, if get out the vote matters, and all that, then Biden probably wins. But if vibes matter and narratives and all that, then Trump certainly has a shot and excitement.
I'm actually of the view
that's how it always was. I don't know if you remember.
I'm of the view that often narratives do matter than ground game. Ground game. There's some research on this, and it's not all pointing in the exact same direction, but it can really mean only as much as a point. Good ground game. It's hard to move the needle with ground game. So if you've won the message war and you're up by 4 points, ground game's probably not going to flip that around. But we have polling to suggest that that's not the race that we're in, and we have evidence of the last 2 elections that's not the country that we live in. So I would not, be flip about how I was putting my ground game together.
I agree. My theory has always been everything matters, and you want to win every facet of a campaign, and do not let any aspect of it go. You should win the sign wars, win the TV ad war, win the fundraising war, win the message war, win the door knocking war if you're like in a local campaign. Everything matters, and you don't want to get and lose a campaign and be like, yeah, I guess we should have had a better ground game.
Yeah, it's just I mean, Trump won 2016, not doing things the right way. So I do have to always caveat and be like, weird things can happen. I can't say definitively that this means he will lose, but I just don't think he's not maximizing his chances by doing it this way.
Indeed. All right, my friend. Well, probably time to hit the road. Anything you want to plug before we call it a day?
Check out the Washington Monthly newsletter. I talked about the Milwaukee. I talked about Milwaukee. Actually, I just the Milwaukee on Tuesday. We also have a piece of the Washington Monthly that was written before all this that happens to center on Milwaukee and gun crimes. A deep investigation of the challenges of tracing guns and going after gun dealers because of changes made, to the law during the Bush era, and so it's a very well done reported piece that really raised a lot of eyebrows about how guns get into the country. So I would definitely check that out, the Washington Monthly.
All right. Well, this is probably a good time to plug supporting what we do here. You can go to patreon.com/Bill Scher or patreon.com/Matt Lewis and do just that. Also, if you're listening, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we get some ad revenue there too. So check that out. Follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Bill Scher, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Take care. See you next week.
All right, we'll see you next week in the DMZ. Thanks.